We value biodiversity on the farm, but management often dictates how much of it we have. This is obvious with intensively farmed areas, but perhaps not so apparent in wilder looking landscapes. Even in the hills, the dominance of a small range of plant species can have a negative impact. Some, like rhododendron and cherry laurel, are invasive species that have been introduced to Ireland, but others are native plants that have just spread a little too much. How we manage the land, and particularly the animals that graze it, has a huge impact. If gorse is dominant, it is because the management of the land has encouraged it. If we want to control gorse, then we have to adjust the management. Anything else is a temporary fix, a sticking plaster, not a cure. Gorse, often called whins in the north and west, in the south it is often known as furze. It is a spiny shrub with brilliant yellow flowers. It is related to peas and clover, and like them, it can fix nitrogen from the air. In the past, it was used for hedging and as forage for horses. The wood was used for making walking sticks and was burned in ovens for baking bread. The flowering branches were sometimes hung over doorways to keep the fairies away. Whether you call it furze, gorse or whins, it can be a real asset. Thickets of it shelter and protect young trees. Its flowers are great for insects, and the spiny branches shelter the nests of small birds. But sometimes it can take over an area, and this can lead to serious problems. It contains natural oils and burns easily. Because it is tall, the flame height can be considerable, and gorse fires can easily get out of control and spread to other types of vegetation and to forestry. In recent years, the most common methods of control have been burning or grubbing out with a machine. Both of these can cause problems. Not just the obvious hazards to wildlife and forestry, but also because these methods do not work very well. Let's look at a patch of gorse. The one thing that strikes you is that the plants are all more or less the same size. The reason for this is simple. All of them started to grow at the same time. This plant loves bare ground. Whether cleared with a machine or scorched by a fire, it suits gorse perfectly. If gorse was growing there before, the soil will be full of seeds, up to 10 million per acre. These can stay dormant for 30 years, and when conditions are right, huge numbers of them can spring to life. In fact, the heat from a fire can activate many of these seeds. On land where gorse was burned, the plant recovers very quickly. New growth will spring up from the stumps, to be joined by thousands of young plants growing from the now activated seeds. But what is missing are the tree seedlings, the grasses, the flowers, insects, frogs and small mammals, not to mention the chicks caught in their nest by the advancing flames. The site is now completely dominated by gorse, but it may take many years to regain the biodiversity that was there before the fire. Controlled burning can have a role in some situations, but by itself it is not a strategy. Regenerating gorse after a controlled burn has to be managed by grazing, and grass or other vegetation has to be established. Uncontrolled burning is just reckless and dangerous. We need another way. Managing this plant is a long-term project. If it is growing on a bank or a rocky outcrop, or if you have patches of it in wet grassland, then leave it alone. It can be a valuable habitat and should be retained wherever possible. We should learn to love it for what it is, nature's way of covering bare soil, building it up and sheltering young trees. But if we need to manage gorse, then we have to consider its life cycle and how and when it is vulnerable. The stems of mature plants are spiny, not very attractive as forage. Cattle are not able to deal with the mature plant. When a cow eats, it grabs vegetation with its tongue and lips and tears it away. This suits a diet of soft vegetation like grasses, but does not equip the cow very well for a diet of woody shrubs. Sheep are very selective grazers and will generally avoid gorse. At high stocking rates they may nibble the young shoots, and this can make the plant very dense looking, but it will not suppress it. Horses and goats seem to have a knack for turning short lengths of gorse in their mouth, so that the spines fold down along the stem as they chew it. But the real benefit of horses and goats is when they go for the bark. In late winter and early spring, there is very little nutrition left in the grass, but the sap is rising in trees and shrubs. Bark becomes very attractive to horses and goats at this time, and they will consume it with relish. If they remove the bark all the way around the stem, the leaves will not be able to feed the roots. In time, the roots will starve and the plant will die. This is a slow process. It might take up to a year. In a large block like this, the horses will break some of the stems and they will open up the scrub by creating paths or tracks through it. As the damaged plants die off, these paths will become wider. The solid gorse will be replaced with clumps in a more open setting. Opening up the scrub promotes and encourages a wider range of plants and creates hunting opportunities for hen harriers. To achieve this, timing is vital. The horses must be present in late winter or early spring. Between January and March is ideal. The stocking rate needs to be high, but it does not need to be maintained for very long. In this field of about 1 acre, we have had 5 horses grazing for 3 weeks. To achieve this stocking rate, the animals will have to be fenced in and water must be available to them. Check the animals daily. Make sure to give the animals some ration to supplement their diet of gorse. If any animals are not thriving, remove them immediately. Mature horses, geldings or dry mares are best. Foals, lactating mares and stallions should not be used. It is important to check that there are no plants that could harm the horses. Sycamore, oak and especially yew can be poisonous. If these are present, it is probably better to keep the horses away. Once we get into April, horses will switch over to browsing on the young growth and even eating the flowers. This will have no long-term impact on the gorse, so it is best to move the animals on by the end of March. Once the horses are gone, we have to establish vegetation to compete with the big flush of gorse seedlings that will follow. As the soil may still be shaded, it is best to use a mix of grass seeds rather than just a single type. This will give you the best possible chance to establish a sward. On mineral soils, apply some granulated lime. The soil was probably acidic to begin with, and years of dead needles falling and decaying will have made it even more so. Gorse seedlings can cope with this, but many grasses and other plants will not. The lime will bring the pH up, make the soil less acidic, make it more hospitable for grasses, and less so for young gorse plants. Even so, a lot of seedlings will germinate. They should be tackled while they are young, or you will be back to square one. Graze the site with sheep or ideally goats in late summer. They will help tiller the grass, thicken up the sward, and will also eat many of the soft gorse seedlings. Grazing can be an important tool in the management of gorse. It is slow, but it is gentler and closer to nature. It is not as dangerous and is more controllable than burning. It protects the soil better than scraping or grubbing out with machines. And it is more effective. Good grazing management allows the farmer to build a patchwork of scrub and grassland, a habitat that supports wildlife and livestock.